Hola a todos. Bueno, ya me conocen, ya me han visto por acá. Y pues les voy a hablar un poco sobre desarrollo académico. So I'm going to talk about academic development. You thought I was going to talk in Spanish, right? Just a prologue. So anyway, so the big question here. Oh. Closer? Okay, so you have to be really close. Okay, so the question here, if you are in this school, you probably are questioning if you can do apply topology for a living. Okay? And yes, you can. Okay, you can see some examples here of people who are doing that for a living, so it is possible. But one thing about mathematicians is sometimes we are distracted and we only think about math. This is a stereotype, but there is some truth behind the stereotype. So sometimes we don't think about all the kinds of questions which are important to develop this mathematical career. And the point of this is to give you some things, some hints about for your career, which are really common sense. Okay, but sometimes we lack common sense too. And I'm talking for myself too. So when I started following this career, I had no idea of what I was doing, and I wish that somebody told me some of these things. So this is what I'm going to say. Also, I did a similar talk a couple of months ago, and some of you were here, so sorry, I apologize for you're going to hear the things twice. Okay, so let me go in order. So some of you are undergraduate, and you want to start learning algebraic topology to start applying this. So how can you do this, especially if your undergraduate program doesn't have algebraic topology courses? So there are some things that you can do. For example, you can ask for them. I mean, sometimes they don't offer them because not enough students ask for this course. If this is not possible, you can still get a chance to get one of these courses by asking an external professor to teach a course at your institution. Sometimes this is allowed. Sometimes this is not allowed, but there can be an arrangement when they have an external professor teach the course and an internal professor put the name in the course. Okay? Sometimes it's not possible. In that case, you can take an online course. Right now, this is more common, so this is nice. And sometimes you can validate this for your degree. This is not always the case, but if not, and you are only interested in learning about the topic, you can just audit the course, at least you're learning. You can also spend a semester, let me lower this down. You can also spend a semester at the institution where you have these courses. So you contact somebody at the institution, they have interchange programs, or you have interchange in your institution, find these opportunities. There are also these very interesting research summer experiences here in Mexico, where you can spend a research summer with topologies like Verano Delfín, Verano Jaguar, Verano CIMAT, and you get like 7 to 8 weeks, and at least you get an introduction and a real feeling of what it's like, the topic. Okay. Okay. What else can you do? You can write an undergraduate program about algebraic topology or an undergraduate thesis. And this is a really fun way to learn about topology, even if you didn't take any course in that, but you learn on your own. You can also go to schools where these topology courses are offered, like you are doing right now, so you're on the right track. And also you can learn on your own, but of course this is difficult, okay? So if you try to learn on your own just by looking at videos, just by reading books, it may be complicated, but you can also contact a topologist so that he can give you a guide. And with that guide, it will be a bit easier. Yes. What's that? Oh, this is your case. Okay, so. Uh-huh. Okay. So you see an online, real instances of this. Thanks. Oh, by the way, if you have any comment or any input of what I say, if you say, okay, this is not true, yeah, please let me know, because this is really meant to be interactive. Okay. And something you should know is sometimes there are some institutions that can give you a scholarship to write an undergraduate thesis. So this is a nice way to motivate you to write this thesis. Okay, so this is graduate. Then you want to go to graduate school. There are many graduate schools here in Mexico, and I'm going to focus for now in Mexico. Maybe in the question at the end, in the questions, I can say a bit more about the U.S., which is a common place where people from Mexico go to graduate school. So there are three main institutions which have graduate degrees with topologies, which are CIMAT, CIMBESTAB, UNAM, in the different branches. But of course, these are not the only ones. There are many state universities and private universities which have topologies, but it will be just too long to mention all of them. Okay, so now this is a point where there is a bit of change between Mexico and United States, because here in Mexico it's more common to go first for the master and then for the PhD, while in the United States you usually go straight into the PhD. So I will make a comment about that later on, and maybe Catherine can correct me if I say something wrong. Okay, so how do I decide what I go for my master? Okay, this is an important decision. So here are some things that you should consider. First, you should think about who your supervisor could be. Okay, you should check the admission dates and when you have to take the admission test. Of course, money is important. Here in Mexico, most of the scholarships are given by CONACYT, so you should check whether these programs, whether the CONACYT scholarship are being offered for this program, because this is not always the case. Okay, if not, sometimes there are other scholarships, like for example, scholarships from grants of the professors in those institutions. Also, something that you should consider is what is the format of the master. There are different masters, okay? They are not the same. Some of them are oriented toward courses. So you take courses and you kind of make your formation more solid. Some of them are oriented for the thesis. So you just mostly go to write your thesis. Some of them are oriented for industry. There are some like that too. So you have to think which one of these you want. Of course, this is common sense, but you also have to check that you satisfy all the prerequisites. So sometimes they require a minimum grade in your undergraduate degree, or sometimes you are required to finish your thesis before you enter, or they allow you some leeway between the time that you finish your thesis and the time you enter. And also something that you should consider, and sometimes it's not considered, is whether you are considered to continue and then doing a PhD abroad. Because this is something that you may not know, but when you go to do a PhD in the United States or in Europe, and you come from a degree from the university that nobody heard about, so you probably are in a disadvantage. I mean, you may have very good grades, but if nobody heard about this university, they will have doubts. Say, who is this guy? Okay? So in that case, if you come from a recognized institution, that could make a difference whether you are accepted or not. It shouldn't, but it is the reality. Okay? Okay. Any questions so far? No? Anyway, we have plenty of time at the end for questions too. Okay, something that is very important is choosing your supervisor. And I will say a bit more about this for the PhD because it's even more important. But there are essentially two cases for the master's degree. You may not know who your supervisor will be. You don't know who you want to study with. And you don't want to think about it. So you want to just go into the master. So in that case, it's better if you choose a master program which doesn't require you to choose a supervisor from the beginning. Okay? But in that case, say, okay, but how do I know that then I will find a nice supervisor, a supervisor that is convenient for me? Well, because of that, it's good to choose an institution which has a large group of research, because in that way you have a better chance of finding a good one. Okay? And the second case, you wish to start with a supervisor already. So if there is a specific topic that you like to work on, Start by finding out who are the experts on the topics and which topics they are working on. It's good that you contact or talk to students, previous students of the supervisor, to see what is the experience of working with this person. Yeah? And you can also contact this potential supervisor beforehand, and he can tell you, okay, if you start working here, you can work on this topic or on this problem. And usually they will answer, okay? The people are nice. There are other things that you should consider. It may be that he's not accepting students at this time. He may have too many students, okay? Something very important, and even more important for the PhD, which I will come back for this later, is if your personalities are compatible. Of course, you may not know this when you enter into the program, but you may find out about this from his previous students. See? Also, you should be alert for red flags. I mean, if there is some hearsay about the supervisor, you may consider it. Okay. Okay. Now, on the topic of the thesis. So what is the difference between the undergraduate, master, PhD thesis? So more or less is this. In an undergraduate thesis, you are going to write about a topic which is not covered in your degree. You are not going to take a course about that, and you focus on this topic for your undergraduate thesis. You are not expected to do anything new. You are expected to understand what you are doing, essentially. In a master thesis, you are not expected to do anything new either, but you are expected to get close to the state of the art. So somehow become a little expert, okay? While for the PhD, you are expected to make a contribution to the state of the art and now really become an expert, okay? Something that people don't know sometimes is that you don't have to do an undergraduate thesis in topology and then a master in topology and then a PhD in topology. You can change at any time, and it doesn't matter, okay? Sometimes it may even good to change, okay? Okay, now we come to the PhD degree. So many of the things that I mentioned about master program also apply to the PhD degree. But in this case, it's even more important to choose the supervisor. Why? Essentially because you're going to be spending 4 to 5 years with this person. So it's extremely important that you are compatible, right? Also, it is important that you choose your topic well, because for the same reason, you're going to be sleeping with this topic for 4 to 5 years. So you really want to be passionate about this topic. If you are not passionate and you just, okay, I want to finish this, at this point it's going to become something dull, and you're going to be bored, and it may even affect the fact that you finish the program. Okay. Okay. Yeah, this point. This is an important point. I mean, when you choose your topic, in a PhD, you are supposed to become an independent researcher. Okay, so you are not going to be a continuation of your advisor. I mean, the topic has to be related to what your advisor does, because he has to be able to help you during the program. But you have to become your own researcher. So you have to find your own path. Okay, and if you don't see that working with this researcher is going to help you become an independent, then you should go in a different direction or choose somebody else. Okay, and again, this is something that you can find out from the previous students. So you see, for example, that all the previous students only did papers with their advisors and then disappear. Then that may be a red flag. Okay. Okay. Another reason why choosing a supervisor is very important is because your supervisor recommendation letters are going to play a very important role in your future, but not in the immediate future, but in your whole career. You will need recommendation letters for postdoc positions. You will need recommendation letters for permanent positions, and that process may be long. I mean, it may be 10 years in the future. So it's important that you have a very nice relationship with him. For instance, you are applying to a job and you don't get a recommendation letter from your supervisor, that's really bad on you. I mean, they will say, why is this? I mean, you should really justify why this is not happening. Of course, there are situations where this is justified. For example, if you suffer harassment from your supervisor and then you moved away from your supervisor, you should justify that in your application so that they know that this happened, right? Okay. And as I mentioned, the same things that I said about master programs also apply for PhD programs. So just check the requisites, check the scholarships. Okay. Now you may be wondering, what do you do in a PhD program? Well, you start by taking some courses, and these courses are advanced, and they're usually from your area, but not necessarily about the topic that you are working on your thesis. This is a point where this is a bit different in the US, because in the US, because you are supposed to do master and PhD at the same time, maybe the first year or even the first 2 years are more oriented towards general courses, okay? But in Mexico, you usually start with advanced courses already. You will have weekly meetings with your advisors. You will have weekly meetings with your advisor, which is also a reason why it's important that you get along with him. And this is a funny thing. I mean, if you started with an advisor in an undergraduate and then in master degree, they sort of take you by the leash. So you more or less do what they tell you. In a PhD program, it's a bit different. Your advisor will not tell you what to do. It will just lead you, but in a subtle way. It's more or less they will tell you, okay, why don't you read this article and maybe it will work. Or maybe you come with an idea and they will tell you that's not going to work. So most of the times he will tell you, no, don't do that because it's not going to work. And this is a way of pointing you in the right direction. You are expected to attend and participate in seminars, conferences, schools. Sometimes it will be paid by your program or by your supervisor's grant. You are expected to be more independent than in your master on your undergraduate. So you have to plan really your time, and this is something that maybe we are not used when you were in an undergraduate program or even in a master program, which is sort of everything is laid out. Now you have to plan your own time. You have to say, okay, I'm going to take 8 hours of my week and I'm going to use that for research, and then this other time for writing, and this other time for my courses. So you have to plan it by yourself. Your supervisor will tell you that. And one usual requirement of the PhD program is having a qualifying exam halfway through the program, maybe 2 years into the beginning. Or maybe in the US is sometimes sooner, maybe at the end of the first year. Yep. Now, this qualifying exam, it depends on the program. It may have a different format. So some qualifying exams are really about the basics. And this is more common in the US, for example. So from the courses that you took in the first year, you will take qualifying exams about those kinds of courses. While here in Mexico, the qualifying exams are usually already about the topic that you are working on your thesis. So it may be that by the end of these 2 years, you already have some kind of advance on your topic, then you will talk about that. If you don't have anything new yet, you will talk about the prerequisites that you need to get to your problem, and they will test whether you are an expert already or not, or you are in the right way in the right track to becoming an expert. And this is a very important requirement, because if you fail, you can get kicked out of the program. Okay. More things, you are expected to talk to experts in the field. You may get to teach some courses, but that depends on the institution. For example, in CIMAT, this is complicated. It's a bit easier at UNAM. It depends. And something important too is the last year of your PhD, because in the last year of your PhD, you will start applying for jobs. And some of these jobs are going to require, most of these jobs are going to require that you have a research plan for the next 2 years. Some of them even longer, for 5 years or longer. So in the last year of your PhD, you should start planning for this, because if you do it in the last month, this is not going to play well. Yes. The complete. Mhm. Well, okay, that's a good question. Okay, why is it complicated to do a research plan? Well, you may have some ideas about what is going to work, but that's not always what happens in reality. So you say, I'm going to prove this conjecture, and I'm going to use this method and this method, but you're going to have steps in the middle where you are going to hit blocks, and you cannot continue. So you have to plan for these inconveniences. So when you write your research plan, you cannot say, I'm going to solve Milnor's conjecture. You have to explain how you are going to solve it. And when you explain how you are going to solve it and say, well, I'm going to use this method and this method, you also have to explain, if this method doesn't work, what am I going to do? Okay, so you need to plan for all these sort of eventualities. And also, this is a plan for 2 years. So planning ahead what is going to happen in 2 years or 5 years is always hard, because you can see some of the eventualities that can happen within the next year. But within the next 3-4 years, it's really just guessing. So you spend some hard time thinking about the problem, and that's why you need a year. You will be able to see ahead and see some of the problems that will happen in the future. Yeah. Yeah. Any other questions? Yes. Uh, yeah. Uh, yeah. 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 Yes. Yeah. So, for example, in this event, it's kind of hectic, and there is not a lot of time to talk to everybody. So I understand that. So something you can do when you go to these kinds of events is that you can write an email to the person that you want to talk to in advance. And in that way, when you get to the event, you say, oh, I wrote you an email. Do you think that we can set aside, 10 minutes to talk? And, people will accept that. Or you can find a way to sit with this person when they go for lunch, or find any small time that they have. Yeah. But if you do it in advance, it will be easier, because they already have it in mind to talk to you. Yeah. Does that answer your question? Yeah. More questions before I move ahead? No? Okay. So, okay. Another question that usually comes up is whether you should continue to have the same supervisor throughout your entire career. And this is not the case. And you can have different supervisors for PhD, master, undergraduate. And in fact, my personal recommendation is that you change, because when you change supervisors, you get the best of all the supervisors. So you only have one supervisor. You need that you learn the techniques from that supervisor, and you only get the letter from the supervisor, the recommendation letter, right? So when you change, you get exposed to more mathematics, and this is always nice. However, there are exceptions. For example, it may be that you got into one of these masters where the focus was on courses, and you only got to work with your supervisor for a month, really. So, of course, in that case, it makes sense that you continue with the PhD if you enjoy working with this person. Or another situation is whether your master topic, you really got into a point that was really interesting, and you see that this thesis can be continued into a PhD thesis, in that case, it will make sense to continue with the same supervisor. And there may be other situations that I don't know, but yeah. Okay. Okay, we come to the next step, which is the postdoc stage. And the first question about postdocs is this a degree or is this a job? It is really a job. It is your first job in a way. But sometimes it is treated as a degree, but only for tax reasons. Sometimes your salary will be treated as a scholarship. But it's really a job. Okay, you are expected to work independently. You are, in a way, your own boss, but you will have a supervisor. Now, having a supervisor now is not as having a supervisor for your PhD program or for your master program. You are expected to work independently and to carry out your own research program. Now, you probably got accepted into this postdoc position because you have some relationship with your with the topic of your supervisor. Okay, so he will give you opportunities to collaborate. Okay, but this is not always going to happen. Okay, and it is up to you to make it happen. Yeah, because in a way, your supervisor expects to be like a helper to him in that sense. What should you do in your postdoc? Well, it is a good opportunity to solidify some of the work that you did for your PhD, for example, to publish some of the work that you did, but also to learn a new topic from your advisor or from the new department that you're at, to combine your topic to the topic in there, if you can. And something that is nice about postdocs, and that you will appreciate later on, is that you do not have administrative responsibilities, or do you not have to teach a lot? Because later on, when you have a permanent positions, you have too many things to do, and you don't have enough time to do research. I think Catherine will agree with that too. So yeah, so this is a nice way. I mean, when you at the beginning, when you finish your PhD and you get into a postdoc, sometimes you feel a bit sad because say, okay, this postdoc only lasts for 2 years. When am I going to get a permanent position? And you start having kids and you start having a partner and you get rushed into, I want a permanent position. But you also have to think about it as an opportunity. This is an opportunity to make my research plan more solid so that when I get to a permanent position, I can continue to explore all the paths that I put in during my postdocs. Once you are in the permanent position, you don't have time to make it deep anymore. Okay. Well, as I mentioned, these are usually fixed-term positions. You are not going to lead to a permanent position. How do I get a postdoc in Mexico? Unfortunately, there are not many different choices, but these are most of the opportunities. So first, we have the CONACYT postdocs, and these are the postdocs which are most suitable for your first postdoc. Okay, these are, well, last time I checked, it was 2 + 2 + 1 years, but this changes every year. I mean, you never know, and this is something, and this is being recorded. So well, there's something about CONACYT. We all love CONACYT, of course, but we also love to hate CONACYT. Okay, so the thing about CONACYT is sometimes applications are unpredictable. You never know when they're going to come out. You never know. There is never a specific date, and the documents that are required change from year to year. The format changes from year to year, so you have to really read these documents. Anyway, apart from that, how does the CONACYT postdoc work? First, you have to find a host institution and potential supervisor. And you need to agree beforehand with them, and they need to accept you beforehand, before you start the applications. Because one part of the application for the CONACYT postdoc is a letter from the institution saying that they are going to host you. So you need to get this letter first, okay? And this is all you have to know about CONACYT postdoc. Yep.
In that situation, the responsibility to pay you
from the institution, from CONACYT. From CONACYT. Yep. 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 One important thing about CONACYT postdocs, at least up to as far as I know, is that this is only for Mexican people or Mexican residents. So you need to have a valid immigration status before being able to apply for this. I don't know if this changed. Was that?
I just was wondering how it works here.
Yeah. And if you have more questions about CONACYT postdoc, Jose Luis is a CONACYT postdoc, so he can tell you a bit more about the more intricate details. Okay, other postdocs, CIMAT postdocs. These are postdocs which last for 2 and an additional year. These are not usually for a first postdoc. Why? Because they are very, I mean, there is a fierce competition for these positions. I mean, it's not that you cannot apply. You can apply if this is your first postdoc, and some people do get this first postdoc in CIMAT. But if you get it, that means that you are special, okay? Because usually, there is a lot of competition, and there are people competing for this with 2 and 3 postdocs, okay? What do you need? You need a connection with a CIMAT researcher, although this is not necessary, but that will give you an edge. And the application is around November, December. In fact, right now, this is the application is open. And there are 1 to 3 positions each year, and that depends on the year. And you can apply to be in one of the different units of CIMAT. So it doesn't have to be in Guanajuato. It can be in Mérida. It can be in Zacatecas, in any of the units. Yes.
What is the difference between 5 and 2 plus 2 plus 1?
Oh, okay, that's a good question. That means that at the end of the first 2 years, you need to pass an evaluation, and if the evaluation is positive, you get an additional 2 years, and then at the end of the 4 years, you get an additional evaluation, and then you get an extra year. So when I say the plus, is because you have an evaluation. Yeah. Yeah. Sorry, I didn't mention that. I should have. Okay, let me go to the next. UNAM postdocs. The peculiarity about UNAM postdocs is that you need to have published at least an article to be able to apply, which makes it difficult sometimes for topologists because we finish PhDs sometimes without article. It can also be for the different units. There is a special postdocs for the unit in Morelia because they have a different legal status, so they have their own postdocs. And something that is different, for example, from CONACYT postdocs is that CIMAT postdocs and UNAM postdocs, you don't need to be Mexican. You don't need to have a resident status. You can be from abroad. Okay, so these are the usual ones, the first 3. There are also grant postdocs. So sometimes researchers have their own grants, and they put away some money for postdocs. Of course, you never know when these come out. So, yeah. The bad thing about this is that they are very short. They're usually less than a year long. You never know when they are coming, and may not include the salary for November and December for tax reasons, which is really bad. And sometimes it also has the disadvantage that even if you are hired in January, you may not get paid until March. It's complicated.
This pay is retroactive.
No.
It's not.
I did a small grant postdoc, and I wanted to start in November, but I ended up starting in January, but I was paid in February, and it was not retroactive, it was a semester. And I think it was not retroactive because it's in the study. So perhaps if your supervisor makes it at another institution, it could be retroactive, but that's in the staff, definitely. But I mean, it's better than nothing.
Yes. Yes, that's right. Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah, it should be your last choice. If you can get one of the first 3, that's better. Yeah.
I have another question.
Sure.
There is no industry-based postdoc.
I'm going to talk about going to industry, and also Alfonso is going to talk about these 2. I don't think they are called postdoc. They are more called like internships. But yeah.
What I mean is, if there is any industry here in Mexico interested in develop a research department and then create a sponsorship
Of a postdoc? Not that I know, but maybe Alfonso can have an answer for that. Do you?
it's very difficult to find some of those in other places, but
I'm gonna say I'm gonna say more later about this, but in general in Mexico it's very difficult to find such positions. Yeah.
Thanks. Okay, and there is a final item here, which is the Sofia Kovalevskaya postdocs, which are only for women, but they are only for 1 year also. Okay. To be honest, I don't know much about this last one. Yeah, no, I don't know. Yeah, yeah. If anybody knows anything more about this, that would be great. Yes.
I know that it's over in the middle, but it's
Okay.
in here, and I think that there was a problem, so they still probably run the price,
Mm.
the fair price for years, but from 2027 or something, they're gonna dissolve the.
Well, that's too bad.
That's what they really should get better.
Well, sorry to hear that, but yeah. Okay, let me finish almost. Until when? Until when? Yeah. Okay, so how do you get a postdoc? To apply for a postdoc, you usually need your CV, publications, teaching statement. Oh, there is a question. Sorry.
No. Seeing the new president is writing gonna say to a further.
Hmm.
Is there any maybe information for learn about these conditions?
We don't know yet. I mean, it's too early to say. Yeah. I mean, we don't even know if the budget of next year's for science is going to be higher or lower. We still don't know. So, yeah, it's too early. Yeah. I hope it will improve. Any other questions? Okay, so how do you get your postdoc? So as I was saying, you need to apply with usually your CV, your publications, a teaching statement or a teaching plan, and a research statement, which essentially comes down to what the 2-year plan that I mentioned that you should prepare during the last year of your PhD. You can make that into a research statement by making it a bit longer. Yes.
I would like to develop more perspective on the teaching statement.
Well, this is complicated, but yeah, let me say, I will say a bit more about that. Okay, so let me say about both. Okay, so what is expected to be in the research statement? So your plan for the future, what you have already done, and more or less an idea of the methods that you are going to be using. So it is also like publicity for yourself. So you really have to talk about the things that you have already done and mention a bit about the mathematics. This is good. But you also need to have a plan that shows that you're going to be able to do something during your postdoc time. And maybe it will be even better if you can mention some of the people in the institution that you are going to be working with, if there could be collaboration with these people in some of the topics that you mentioned. But as you say, the research statement is more or less well known what you should write. The teaching statement sometimes is more complicated, especially because, when you finish your PhD, sometimes you didn't even have a chance to teach. So what do you say then, right? Oh, okay, so if you had a chance to teach, you should talk about the courses that you taught. And situations that you got in your courses and how you handle these situations. For example, you have some problematic situation and you solve it in some way. You should talk about it because it shows that you are a good person and knew how to handle your class. And you should talk about your philosophy of teaching. So, for example, in my teaching, I like to accommodate to different teaching styles, for example, and you give examples on how you did that. Or you didn't have a chance to teach, you give examples of how you will do it. Okay? You should talk about things which are increasingly important in these days, which is, how do you handle problematic situations with respect to race or gender, or if there is a situation where there is harassment in your class, how do you handle that? It's important that you mention that. And you can also, there are many things that you can talk about on your teaching statement. You can also talk about the different topics that you are able to teach in. So say, okay, I can teach any kind of course, or I can also teach, or I can only teach courses in algebra and topology. So you can mention all of that. Something else. If you have a chance to teach, and in the institution that you taught, they have these teaching evaluations where the students give their opinions, you can also mention the positive opinions. Of course. And I think that's more or less what you should write. I don't know if anybody would like to say anything else that you can write in those letters. It's a complicated document. Does that answer your question, more or less? Okay, and apart from that, you also are required to have 3 letters of recommendations. One of them should be from your PhD supervisor unless something happened. And you also required to have a letter of motivation where you say why you want to work in this department, who you want to work with, and try to leak the institution boots a bit. Okay, now what is important to get it? This is just how you apply, but what is important to get it? The grades from your PhD, they are not going to matter anymore at the level of postdoc. What is going to be most important is the quality of your PhD thesis. And that's why the PhD program is mostly about the thesis. You have to get a really high quality, and you can get publications before you finish your PhD. That's going to give you a good edge. If you did a master thesis or an undergraduate thesis, that's not going to matter much unless you got publications from them, which is not that common. The number of publications is important, and it is well known that here in Mexico, the publication counting is a fact. But it's also important the quality of the journals. And for that, the journal citation reports is the guide that they usually follow. If it happens that you are selected, they usually first select from the pool of applicants a short list, and then they invite to each of these persons in the short list to give a short talk. And this is a talk about your research, but it's not really only about your research. You may also get questions about whether you are a fit for the department or you know anybody in the institution that you are going to. So coming back to this point, if you are in the interview and they ask you, oh, why are you coming to CIMAT? Who do you want to work with? And you are blank and you don't say anything, that's a red flag, of course. Yeah. Well, research is important, publications are important. They will also consider other things like teaching, supervising, organizing, expository work, even activism. So they may give you a bit of advantage over candidates which are on the same level as you, okay? And of course, interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary research has a lot of value nowadays. So you work in applied topology, which of course falls into interdisciplinary research, that will be of value. Okay, let me go quickly because I want to get to. So I only wanted to talk about the first stage of academia. Okay, once you are at the postdoc level, you may do a few postdocs and then get to a permanent position. I'm not going to talk about how to get a permanent position. That's more complicated. You may ask about it in the questions, of course. But something that you should worry, even at the postdoc position, is about SNI. So SNI, the National System of Researchers in Mexico, is something that you apply for to get an extra salary, okay? And it is considerable money. So you should try to get this, okay? There are different levels. So first you have a level candidate, which is usually the one that you get at the beginning after you finish your PhD and you have at least one publication. But this level, you can only maintain it for a limited number of years, which I don't know how many are there right now. Are they 2, 3? 4. So you can only maintain it for 4 years. And after 4 years, you have to reapply and you cannot get level C. You have to get level 1 at least. If you don't get level 1, you are kicked out of the system. You can reapply in the future, but this is something like a yearly application. And this is more or less the description of what you are expected to be when you are in level 1, 2, or 3. But this is very approximate. There is a lot of article counting, there is a lot of requirements, and it's important to read the documents to apply. And there is an additional category which is not in here because it didn't fit into the PDF, but it's the emeritus level. And this is only for people who are already retiring, and it's not granted to everyone. But you probably shouldn't worry about that right now. Okay. One more. Okay, so as I mentioned, you have to reapply for this. So you usually get this membership for about 5 years, and then you have to reapply again. And some jobs require you to maintain SNI 1. So if you lose the SNI, it may get you, I mean, you may lose the extra salary, but you can also lose your salary, which is bad. Okay, so let me talk now a bit about leaving academia, and on this, Alfonso is going to help me too. So I didn't leave academia, as you can see. So I cannot say really a lot of things about this, but I'm going to talk about things that, you know, from people that I know that left academia, from some of my students who left academia. So, of course, leaving or going to industry is an important decision, and it's a personal decision, so I cannot tell you whether you should do it or not. This is up to each of you. I'm just going to tell you how the situation changes when you leave academia. So something that you should consider when making the switch. First, when applying, the job interviews are very different. They are not going to ask you to give a talk, okay, on your research. They don't care about the research that you did, probably. The job interviews are going to be very formal. You probably even have to dress up, okay, pray like a regular adult. The CVs are very different too from the CVs that we usually use in academia. I will mention a bit more about that later. Networking is very important. People that you know in the company, getting to know people in the company before you apply and after you apply, and keeping up and contacting them and, you know, being behind them all the time. Of course, big plus, higher salary. As you know, the salary in academia is not very high, and most of the jobs in industry is higher. But on the other hand, there is less flexibility. So in academia, we have a flexible schedule. You can choose when you do your stuff. You can work at 2 a.m. in the morning, and that's fine. And the next day you cannot go to work. That's fine because you already did your job. That's not the case in industry usually. Okay, they are more rigid with respect to that. So there are pluses and yeah. Now, something which is very different from the way that we are educated in academia is that when you go to industry, the problems are not ideal anymore. They are real problems. Okay, and the company needs solutions. Okay, they don't want you to say, no, this is impossible. No, they want you to solve it. Okay, like I said, they don't want counterexamples. They want the solution. And not only that, and this is something that is very difficult for people who leave academia, deadlines are short. I mean, they don't tell you have to finish the article in 6 months. They tell you have to finish it in 2 weeks. So this is something that is hard to get used to. So if you get into one of these companies, you are expected to learn quickly. Okay? I mean, they are going to appreciate that you come from a different place and they will give you some leeway at the beginning, but yeah. Something interesting too is that the work may be compartmentalized. I don't even know how to say that word. What does that mean? That means that you may be working in a project when you are supposed to do something and you don't know the real purpose of the project because somebody else is doing this part, somebody else is doing this part, somebody else is doing this part, and at the end they will put it all together. And this may be for some people in academia, maybe dull because they want to see the big picture, right? But on the other hand, it's nice because you get to collaborate with people with a different expertise area, which is nice. Yeah. Okay, some other plus of working in industry. You may have access to cutting edge technology. But here we are lucky to get a computer sometimes. And you may be able to develop products, which is also very interesting. You don't need to worry about funding. The company has to worry about funding. And you may see the impact of your work really soon because the company is really about time and money. Okay. Something very different too is communication. Okay. So it's not only about doing something, but also about convincing people that what you are doing is useful. So there's a lot of publicity too involved. What? Copyrights and patents are something that take more importance in industry too. I can say more about that because I don't know why. And something that you should consider too is that when you get hired in industry, you come from academia, you may get hired at a lower level than you expected because you come out of academia and say, well, I am a PhD, bow before me. But that's not going to happen, okay? Okay. But because of your abilities, it may be that you are able to climb faster than other people. So keep that in mind, okay? Also, something to keep in mind is that if you leave academia, sometimes it may be difficult to get back. So this is a big decision. If you leave, think about it may be that I cannot come back to academia, especially if it's after a PhD. I mean, if you leave after undergraduate and you do some work in industry, it's still possible to come back to master or PhD, or even after master. But after PhD, it gets more complicated. And something that didn't make it into the page, there are some people in companies, in industry, that gets to do research, even pure or applied research, but this is not the common thing. I mean, some people do, but it's not common. Okay, let me go a bit faster. So how do you make the leap to industry? The best part of the best way of doing this is to start making these steps while you are still in your academic program so that it becomes something more fluid. So for example, you can start researching companies which are hiring mathematicians. For instance, former graduates at your institution who went into industry. You can talk to these people and ask them how the experience went so that you can apply in an easier way. You can do an internship or a voluntary work to see how it works and to see that it's really a good fit for you. Something that sometimes we are unwilling to do is to talk to our advisors. Because, we are in academia and say, oh, I'm supposed to continue in academia. And I went to this advisor because I wanted to do this infinity category stuff. And now I want to work in data science. We will not tell you anything about it. We will help you. Okay, so don't be embarrassed to tell us about it. We will do everything we can to help you. And the CV part, as I mentioned, a professional CV is quite different from an academic CV. So it's hard to learn how to do this. So I think the best way to do it is to ask somebody in industry that you know to give you feedback on your CV and to help you do it. Yeah, I cannot help you do it. For example, I have no idea how a professional CV works. Okay, and the last thing, if you can, during the program, try to learn some of the necessary skills that people in the industry value. And some of them are, for example, the use of software or all the different languages, but there are other so-called soft skills that they value in companies, like multitasking, leadership, project management, resource allocations. And some of these skills, we do have it as mathematicians and we do use them, but we use them in a lower scale that they do. Okay? And there are a couple other things that you can do, like, get involved with institutions, collaboration with companies. And something that is important, because you are not probably going to get the first interview, is start going to interviews while you are still in the program. In that way, you get more chances to get it. And I think this is all I wanted to say about industry. But anyway, the session will continue a bit after lunch, because Catherine is going to tell us a bit more about how it works in the United States, which I didn't say much. Okay. Thanks. Thank you.